Hello, I am Elle Cole. I am a mom of twins, and today I am going to talk to you about homeschooling successfully while parenting a child with a chronic illness. So, if you're not familiar with me, I am a mom that hosts a homeschool podcast called the Cleverly Changing Podcast. And on my journey, I've been sharing my story about parenting my daughter who has sickle cell disease and type 1 diabetes. I homeschooled my children for 7 years, and I am really looking forward to talking to you about how we were able to make homeschooling work for us and be successful at it. So stay tuned and watch the whole entire presentation, and I hope you will learn some new tips and tricks that may help you and your homeschool. So this presentation we'll have tips for all homeschoolers, but especially for families who have a child living with a chronic illness. So if you're saying to yourself, I'm the person with a chronic illness, then yes, this presentation is for you as well. Or if you're saying, my child that I'm homeschooling doesn't have a chronic illness, but maybe you're keeping a grandparent with a chronic illness, these tips will also apply. So even if your situation doesn't fit the narrative to a T, this is still a presentation for you. So this is my family. I have been married for 16 years. This is my husband. We met in college, and we have twins. Yes, our children don't look exactly alike. They are fraternal twins, and one of my daughters has both of the chronic illnesses. And so that has impacted my homeschool. It's impacted how I raise my other daughter as well. And so in this presentation, we're going to really delve into how I parented both of my kids dealing with different challenges. So I actually started homeschooling because my daughter has a genetic disorder and an autoimmune disease. Homeschooling was a necessity for my family. In fact, when my children were very young, the pediatrician recommended that I homeschool them. It wasn't something that I met with my husband about because I had dreamed of homeschooling all of my life. No, I had not. Ironically enough, though, when my husband was small, his mother homeschooled him until he was in the fourth grade. And so it wasn't something that was completely foreign to our household, but it was completely new to me. I have a background of going to public school, and then I went to a private school. And so I naturally thought that is how I would raise my own children as well. But it was a different story and a different experience for my kids in my household, but we embraced it wholeheartedly. So to be successful, I feel like you need to be aware of the 5 B's. What are the 5 B's? They are be honest, be flexible, be skilled, be practical, and be open. So we're really going to unpack all of those 5 B's today and really help you understand how families are making it work. Homeschooling with determination, planning, and resources, you can equip your children with the education you need. So I don't have a teaching background, but I do have a degree in English and a degree in history. I have always loved education. And so I don't think it was completely foreign that I would teach my own kids. When I was in college to make money for school, I actually worked with children in the elementary school that was nearby my college, teaching them how to read. So as far as a background, I did come in with one-on-one experience with children. So it wasn't completely unique for me to teach my own children, but I don't have an education degree, but I do have a degree. I don't feel like you need to have a degree to educate your children because as parents, I feel like we naturally want the best for our children. And even if you are an adult, you can learn. You can learn new tricks, you can read, you can expand your own mind. And I think if you have a willingness to learn, then you can be a good teacher. So let's talk about that first B. I said, be honest. I have talked to many different families over the years, and some kids I've met have told me that their parents never told them they had a chronic illness. They knew they were going to the doctor, but they didn't actually know what was wrong with them. I would actually advise against that. I don't really know what the parents' mindset was around not disclosing to their children what the chronic illness was, but it's not something that I keep away from my child because I want her to be able to one day advocate for herself. So I try to be honest with her about the different things that are affecting her. So we have an open and honest conversation about what her illness is and how it affects her body. I don't just have that conversation with her, I have that conversation with my husband and her sibling as well, because I feel like as a family, a chronic illness is something that impacts us all. So, this is something that we as a family should be able to talk about openly and have open dialogue and communication with our extended family members as well. So, number one, if you have a child with a chronic illness and other children, be honest about their condition. Educate them so they won't worry or be afraid. There is power in knowledge. There is power in disclosing information to our children because just having that communication can help cause some of their fears to subside. I also encourage you to keep a journal about your feelings and about your child's symptoms, especially if it is something that may change with age, something that may change when they grow. But this will start empowering them to learn how to ask questions with their doctor, learn how to communicate with their other healthcare professionals, because we often have to describe so many different things to our healthcare team, and keeping a journal can be a perfect companion to helping you remember things that you may not recall in the moment. The next thing that I encourage families to do is keep a gratitude jar. Having a chronic illness is a heavy weight on the entire family, but there's a lot of things that we can be thankful for. And I think we also have to be honest. So even if there are things that are going wrong, we have to find a way to distract ourselves and focus on something else. And having a gratitude jar will help us remember the good things that are happening, even though they may be in the midst of storms and bad things that are happening. So when I think back about my relationship with homeschooling and raising my daughter, she had a lot of interruptions. And those interruptions can be a lot to handle. And so I want to talk to you today about how to combat some of these interruptions with things that are positive. So, interruptions that can disrupt schooling are appointments. When you have a chronic illness yourself, I'm sure you know that you may have a lot of appointments. That's true for a child that has a chronic illness. And so if you have more than one child, you are probably going to have to take your other kids to the doctor's appointments. I know right now during the pandemic, it's a little bit more complicated about taking your other children to appointments, but it's something that we should be aware of. Another interruption that we faced was fatigue. My daughter was tired a lot, and sometimes when she was tired, her sister was ready to learn. And so I had to learn how to juggle just dealing with one child who's not ready to pay attention with the other child who is. And so I would actually teach some lessons separately because of that, because I felt like if my other child was facing fatigue, I needed to let her rest because I want her to learn how to listen to the cues her body is giving her and not just push them to the side as much as possible. And so I would let her sleep in, and that is kind of how we were able to manage the fatigue. The next thing that can face a homeschooling family with a chronic illness is stress, worry, and burnout. This can happen to the child, but it also can happen to the adult as well, especially if you have a lot of different tasks and you're wearing a lot of different hats in your household. And so a lot can be weighing on you. And if you don't have an outlet yourself, then you're going to be stressed, worried, and eventually you may face burnout. And so we are going to unpack how to deal with that. The next thing is medicine changes. So, with a chronic illness, sometimes that can come with things that are unexpected. And so, doctors could be in the process of changing medications. One of the things that I faced was when my daughter was 6, this was our second, actually, it was our first year of homeschooling. And we were in a co op, but what we learned was my daughter started to exhibit some other symptoms, and I had to take her to the doctor. I took both of them with me at the time, and we had to go to the ER, and my daughter received a second diagnosis. That's when we learned that she had an autoimmune disease and she would be insulin dependent. And so that came with some medicine changes and some regimen changes. She had to learn how to use an insulin pump, but at first she had to take shots. And just imagine going to co-op, having to pull her to the side to prick her finger. And so that caused a lot of different types of frustrations for her. She didn't want other kids to see her getting her finger pricked. And for me, I felt uncomfortable, like people were judging me, like I didn't do something right. And so there was a big adjustment that first year of homeschooling. And so we had to learn how to manage different people looking at us strange, having to explain why she needed shots. And so if you are facing that sort of experience, I'm here to tell you, you're not alone. As a parent, talking to other people about it helped me feel like I could cope with it better. So I do encourage people to explain it to other people because people are curious, and educate them, because an autoimmune disease often is caused by different things. It's not something that you as a person did. It can be environmental factors, genetic factors, just multiple different reasons for a person having an autoimmune disease. The next thing is hospitalizations. That is a huge disruption, especially when things can be so unpredictable. And so it's important to be aware that these things can happen. So going into your homeschool, you need to already know what could go wrong, and that will help you prepare better. The last thing is working from home. So I know there are a lot of homeschoolers, and I was a homeschooler who also needed to make money on the side. And so sometimes my work calls and work appointments could cause interruptions in our homeschool life. So here are some ways that we were able to manage those disruptions. The first thing is I learned how to schedule appointments for the first or last appointment of the day. The second thing is I learned how to let my child sleep in. You can homeschool whenever you want to. Be flexible. Be flexible about the timing. There were some times when we would homeschool in the evening once my husband got home. For some for some days, I would actually teach one of my daughters in the day because she was up, she was feeling great, and I would teach her. And then when my husband would come home, she would go play with him, and I would teach my daughter who, wasn't feeling well that day. And so you have the ability to be as flexible as you want to be and still get things done. So, what generally worked for us was homeschooling from 10 to 1. We were not early risers, but if you are an early riser, make that work. For me, while working from home, I would get up early and I would try to get as much of my work done as possible. And then I would teach my kids. So remember, you can homeschool later in the day and the evening, especially if you're someone who also works. Homeschool anytime when your child is most attentive. Take advantage of those times. Now, if you are facing things like hospitalization, stress, worry, and burnout, the solution to that is take breaks when they are needed. So we are going to talk about healthy ways to take a break. When you take a break, it doesn't mean that you don't have to do anything, but I want you to know that you can give yourself grace and have times when you're not doing anything. But you can creatively teach your children with movies, with other families coming in, partnering with someone else, and also really helping people understand that, yes, I'm still homeschooling, but maybe this week we have to take a break because there was a hospitalization. I wouldn't say just work through big disruptions. So I remember when my daughter was first diagnosed, I had them take their workbook to the hospital too, and we were just so stressed. Nobody was thinking about that workbook. And so in the future, I learned hey, we're going to take a break this week and we're going to just enjoy life as a family, learn more about this illness. Because I feel like when you're going to the hospital, you're meeting so many different types of people. That's a different type of education that you don't even realize that you're learning and your children are learning, but they are. So I would not recommend taking your workbooks to the hospital unless you have a kid that just loves doing workbooks on their own. My kids did not, but there's always a caveat to that. If your child does love doing workbooks on their own, go ahead and make that happen for them. But if not, feel comfortable and free to take a break. The last thing I want to talk about in regards to positive ways to manage disruptions is set boundaries with work. Have set work hours. Be able to put that work aside and get things done. Be flexible. Yes, be flexible. To me, this is the most important B. And that means give yourself the permission to do things at a time that works for you and your family. One of the things that I love is PE and activities because you can partner with another family and allow your other children to maybe take a class with other people, and you can deal with your child with the chronic illness or go to appointments. But that would take some sort of partnership with others. If you have multiple children, children over 9 should be able to do some assignments on their own, not everything. And if you have a child and a household that could be dealing with something unique that is the cause of an illness, that whole family is going to be facing something new, not just the child with the chronic illness or not just the parent with the chronic illness. So it can be important to Add in some time to maybe talk about what's going on, but don't put that pressure on your kids to overperform if you're facing an adverse experience or something crazy is going on that's completely unusual. Don't expect them to be Houdini and just work magic and do great work, even though the world is chaotic around them. Understand that they're human too, and they may need some time to pause and understand what's going on. But one of the things that helped me, because there can be numerous times where you have to learn how to make it work and call in other people to help. And so make it easy by using a folder system. Later in the presentation, I'm going to show you exactly what my folder system looked like. So it's not something where you have to reinvent the wheel, but make it easy for yourself by preparing beforehand. Create a system for self-made lunches like sandwiches, fruit, and veggies. If you can afford a laundry service or someone coming in to clean, hire somebody. If you can't afford it, you may ask for help from a friend, or you may designate maybe a family member coming in, or you may put aside, a timer. I actually have these timing cubes, like a productivity cube. You may want to utilize something like this, where you set a timer for 30 minutes and clean one room as much as you can. And so that is one way to maximize your time and also get stuff done. But if you can hire other people, don't be afraid to do that. Plan around the unexpected. So for us, we often use nature and adventure to celebrate moments where we could do things without any interruptions and make their childhood as normal as possible, which meant for us going on bike rides as a family, going skiing, playing tennis, just being outside was healing for us. And so those are ways where we connected with each other, but also had fun, listening and participating and just being normal. And I think you have to have some of those times where you're just not expected to do anything deep thinking. You can be active and creative. And even if you can't be creative by going somewhere or doing something outside the home, you can play board games. You can put a puzzle together. Just finding something that you can do to connect with as a family. That could be baking cookies or baking bread. Find what works for you and your family. For me and mine, it was being outside that really helped to ground us and give us patience and understanding. Delegate tasks that you can't do. Be willing to ask for help. Sometimes we don't want to involve people because we don't want them asking a whole lot of questions about our homeschooling. But if you have a child with a chronic illness, the fact is you cannot do everything yourself. You're going to need help. And I'm a parent who lives in an area where I don't have a lot of family, but I've utilized my friends. I've been honest about what my needs were. And I tell people specifically how they can help, because sometimes people will say, well, let me know whatever you need. And we don't reach out to them because that's just so broad and general. And so I think it's so much easier when you tell people, hey, can you maybe cook dinner, some soup for my family or something that you eat, or you can say, can you watch my child for an hour? And especially if you have other kids. If you're looking at the screen right now, you can see I have my file system. The pictures are right before you. So I had a hanging file box, and we would put the weeks in a folder in the hanging file folders, and they would be separated so that my children could pick out the folder with their name and their day, and they would take out their work. Yes, I have twins, but they were doing some things a little bit differently. So, if you have multiple children, this system may work for you. This is a system that I like that worked for me. And for my kids, when they were done with their work, they would put it in the completed. So on the upper right image, you see where it's a black hanging file system, and it says unfinished and completed. And so they would put their completed work there, and that's the work that I would grade. I would reach out to my family members because they weren't always able to actually watch my kids, but when they would come, they would be like, I'm willing to grade papers for you. So I would let them grade papers, and they loved adding stickers. They also liked working with them because my children did not like handwriting. And so my sisters would often help them, working with them with handwriting and things like that. And so that's how I allowed other people to help me. Another thing that I think is very important is to practice self-care. So sometimes that means you have to hire a sitter or ask somebody to watch your kids, or even just get your spouse to watch the kids so that you can practice self-care. For many years, without having family around, my husband and I, we would tag team and watch our own kids, but sometimes he would let me have that break that I desperately needed so that I could practice self-care, so that I could avoid burnout, avoid stress and worry. And so also make therapy a priority. Having a chronic illness is a lot to take on and a lot to deal with. And sometimes you need to talk to a professional about all of the things that you encounter. So don't be afraid to do that. Plan in advance so it will be easier for others to assist you. Having a system like the one that I'm showing you on the screen with the hanging file folders, it makes it very clear what your child has to do. So if you have to, step out because there's a hospitalization, someone else can watch your other kid and they'll know exactly what they have to do. The more you plan in advance, and I wouldn't say do it very far in advance, but you will learn what works for you. And the more I print it out in advance and the more I put things together to say, this is what we have to do, the easier it is for me to allow other people to help. Be open. Make a list of things that others can do to make things easier for you, like running small errands, cooking, laundry, cleaning, listening, babysitting, those type of things. Exercise. So I know that when we are thinking about allowing other people to help us, we don't always think about just asking somebody to take our kids to the park. That is very helpful. Somebody in the neighborhood, like taking a walk with your neighbor just to have an adult to talk to. Going hiking, going bird watching, flying kites, visiting a local state park or national park, trying yoga, practicing indoor aerobics. All of these things will help you deal with stress, and it can be a source of community where you can do these other things with other people and build relationships. So to me, partnering with other people is something that we as homeschoolers really value, especially when we think about socialization, which is, one of the buzzwords in our community. And it's something that is very doable and practical for us to do. And these are just some of the ways that have worked for me and my family. Be skilled. What does that mean when it comes to homeschooling? Well, Encourage your child to develop a hobby, especially when you have multiple children, because it can feel like you're tending to one and not necessarily paying attention to the other children. And so if your children have a hobby, I think they're less worried about, the nuances and the specifics of that quality time. They're thinking, oh, I'm drawing, I'm reading, I'm doing this. And there's something to fill those gaps of time so they have something to do. The great thing about some of these hobbies is they can do it wherever they go. So for us, when we had so many doctor's appointments, taking a book along just became a staple in our lives. We had books in the car and we would always check out books from the library. And that really helped us go on adventures without leaving our home, because sometimes it just was not feasible for us to go anywhere or leave the house. And so reading became a mainstay. Creative writing, especially so many of our children are imaginative and have vivid, creative imaginations where they're creating different stories and different characters. Let them develop that skill because they can turn it into books that they could sell eventually. It could just be fun. I think it's important for us to recognize when our children need to learn how to relax. So a hobby can be a source of relaxation and a source of motivation. It will feel good for your child to see whatever they're drawing or painting or building or coloring or making, all of those things become things that they can look back at and see they had a thought and then they created it. And that can be a boost of confidence for them. And so I really encourage kids to have a hobby, whether they have a chronic illness or a sibling with a chronic illness. A hobby to me is something that is very important. And it's not just important for our kids, it's also important for us too. I'm a mom, I write books, I'm an author. So that creative writing and reading, that is one of my hobbies as well. And so I've taken my hobbies and I've been able to turn that into a source of passive income. So it has helped my family to really develop our skills and own it, own what we're good at, and be able to cultivate those different skills and talents. And so by developing a hobby is a great way to cultivate certain skills that your child may innately have. Be practical. Now, we all want to be Superwoman or Superman, but the fact is, I'm not trying to lie to anybody. You cannot do it all. You simply cannot. You are one person. And so I think it's very important to be practical and wake up in the morning and know I'm one person, and these are the things that are priorities for me to get done. And so you can create an objective, but don't beat yourself up if you cannot get everything done. Have core things that you want to get done that day and then move them to tomorrow. And so that's where being practical and flexible really coincide. If you're a parent, make a list of things that need to be done. This will help you realize, okay, this is my to-do list. These are the core concepts I want my children to learn today. Touch on those. Don't make it too many. It may just be 3. And so work on those, because if you need to extend the school year by adding in more time to make sure your child learns core lessons, you can do that. Shopping can be a source of stress for some people, or it can be an outlet. So you have to decide if that's important for you. If going shopping physically is something that you want to do, then by all means make it happen. But if it's too much, shop for things online. They have Instacart. You could get your groceries. You could get school supplies. You could get everything. everything online. And so I think it's very important for you to be honest about what you can handle. And so it may cost a little bit more money to get Instacart for your groceries, but if that's something that will take some stress off your plate, then I think it's something you should do. Make lunches in advance. I have had that on my slide multiple times because I think having healthy food is very important to really keep your stress levels in check. And so as early as possible, get your kids involved, making those lunches and make sure you eat. Sometimes in the early years of my homeschooling, I realized that when my kids were eating, I would go back and work and I wouldn't eat. That is not healthy. And so I quickly had to stop doing that. And when my child would go, like have doctor's appointments, sometimes I would schedule those doctor's appointments around lunchtime. And we would eat late, and I had to learn how to stop doing that. Or if it was no choice and we had to do it, we would actually pack lunches and take them with us. And so that's something that you have to think about. Is packing lunches and going out something that you need to do to make sure that you eat regularly, that you're being healthy? And so you have to decide that beforehand. Teach your children how to prepare their own lunches and set up a system to refill items quickly. If you can have a friend when they're running to the store pick up some items for you, do that. There's a lot of systems that will allow you to send money to your friends, like Cash App, Zelle, Venmo. Like, it's really no excuse if we need the things done, but we can't really do them ourselves. There are systems in place that will help us. We just have to say the word that we need help. Remember, raising a child with a chronic illness is not easy, but be positive. Children take their cues from adults around them. So while everything will certainly not be easy, parents can exemplify how to react during these adverse times. When I think about my daughters, I know that the one who doesn't have a chronic illness has a lot of compassion for others and a lot of empathy because of the experiences she's had seeing her sister get sick and seeing other people deal with different things in our family, because I have a mom who is 84 and sometimes she would come and stay with us. And so that just added a whole new dynamic to our situation. And so we have to talk to our kids. We have to say, look, this is what's going on. This is happening. And I think by talking about what is taking place in your household, it will prepare them for adulthood. Because I promise you, adulthood is not going to be easy for them, just like it's not easy for us. And so if we teach them how to work through the stress, how to work through confusion, interruptions, distractions, now, while they're little, when they're an adult, it will become much more easier. All right. I hope that I've been able to give you some encouragement and let you know that you can successfully homeschool your children. If you have questions about anything in my presentation, definitely contact me. You can contact me at Cleverly Changing. And I am on Instagram at Cleverly Changing, YouTube at Cleverly Changing, Facebook at Cleverly Changing, and Pinterest at Cleverly Changing. But you can also send me an email. And my email address is contact@cleverlychanging.com. And so I hope that you all will be encouraged fully to do your best. Just know that other families are facing something very similar, so you are not alone in this process. Definitely talk to other people, try to develop a support group if you can. When it came to curriculum, I didn't use any special curriculums. I just taught my kids from different resources that I found that worked for them. And so that's what I encourage you to do. Find what works and be flexible. Try different things. There was one year where I actually had to change the curriculum. I had signed up for an online curriculum with online classes, and it didn't work for us. And then I ended up going to a workbook system where I did workbooks and pages and different things that really helped to reinforce practice. And so one year that was good for us. The next year we had to do something different, but utilize different things like OutSchool, where you can have someone else teaching at least one course to give you some downtime. And so I hope this has been encouraging for you, and I wish you the best. That's it. Have a wonderful conference.